Well, what are the concerns of sleeper cells in the US, Iranian sleeper cells that took advantage of Biden's border crisis and came into the country, and they're ready to strike on US soil? We know the Iranians want to assassinate President Trump. How real are the fears that there could be attacks on US soil?
So I think it's a real concern. I'm definitely not going to downplay that. There 1,000% are Iranian sympathizers here, many Hezbollah sympathizers there. I mean, anyone who's been in or around Dearborn, Michigan, or Hamtramck, Michigan, I think knows that there are many people there who quite literally at times will fly the Hezbollah flag. There are a lot of people there with varying degrees of allegiance to the Iranian regime and their various terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. I think the key thing, though, to note, Rita, is this. This has been a problem for a very long time. There have been one-off lone wolf sleeper cells in the United States, in the Americas in general, certainly all throughout the European continent. This has been going on for a very, very long time. So is a slightly heightened acute possibility of a lone wolf attack here or there now a slightly greater possibility than there was a week or two ago? Sure, I think that's probably the case there. But it was also a possibility a week or two ago. You know, Americans were sobered up yet again on New Year's Day in New Orleans, Louisiana this year, where a jihadist who was radicalized at his mosque in Houston, Texas, drove to Bourbon Street in New Orleans and murdered 15 people in cold blood. So these things just tragically do happen. That's just the reality of Islam and Western civilization. They're not always necessarily a peanut butter and jelly style mix, shall we say. So that's kind of just the way that it is right now.
No.
Now, having said that, look, personally, I mean, I as a religious Jewish American there, I am definitely on higher alert than normal there. But I do think that ultimately, Rita, this is not the kind of thing that can possibly deter America from doing what is best in America's national interest. America has to do what is in its national interest, and the chips will fall where they may from there.
Now, let's check in with the Trump deranged New York Times, once a serious publication, no longer. Now it's running these sorts of fact checks, objecting to Pete Hegseth referring to the male pilots as our boys. This is what the New York Times' John Ismay wrote. He wrote, in the briefing, Hegseth referred to B-2 pilots as our boys on those bombers, yet both men and women have been trained to fly them. Josh, I mean, come on. What is going on there? What an absolute idiotic thing to obsess about. I mean, they were male pilots. He was 100% accurate, and just because females have trained on them doesn't mean he can't use gendered language when describing what actually happened.
Rita, the United States military has dropped for the very first time the so-called MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator. They've done it a whopping 12 times by my count. I think 14 based on some estimates, 12 to 14 times they've done it there. But don't worry, the New York Times is on the real story, right? I mean, what an absolute joke. I mean, what an absolute fabulous joke here. I mean, if these people had any self-awareness, they would look at a Tempest and teapot like this and say, wow, are we actually out of touch here by focusing on the genders of the pilots of the particular B-2 bombers, and on the fact that, oh, gee, by the way, oh, yeah, these planes flew 7,000 plus miles to blow the crap out of this most fanatical evil regime's nuclear weapons program. Maybe, just maybe, that's actually the key story here, not the fact that Pete Hegseth is talking about, proverbially speaking, the boys in the planes. By the way, the fact that we have a young, telegenic, well-spoken, well-coiffed defense secretary who's able to talk about the boys in the planes, Rita, oh, yeah, that's why U.S. military recruitment is at its best point in at least a decade, if not more than that.
Absolutely.
It's the whole point of Pete Hegseth. This is why people like me were so gung-ho about his nomination in the first place, because the way he talks, the way he acts, the fact that he fought in numerous post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he won the Bronze Stars there. He is in touch with the young men and women, to the New York Times' point, who are willing to pick up arms and serve this country there. So the fact that he's willing to kind of talk like this, talk like a boy, you know, irony intended, the fact that he's willing to talk like the boys in the cockpits there, that is very much a feature, not a bug, of the Pete Hegseth SecDef phenomenon.
And his own military record is, again, exemplary. And that's something so many in the media do not give him credit for. They just refer to him as an ex-TV host. Now, before you go, Josh, Donald Trump, many argue, should have got the Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, but he's not a globalist lefty, so he had little chance. But nevertheless, Pakistan has formally nominated President Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of his decisive diplomatic intervention and pivotal leadership during the recent India-Pakistan crisis, end quote there. And Josh, this comes as the Trump administration confirms a peace deal between Rwanda and the Congo.
Look, there's a lot of diplomacy going on the global stage right now. The big kahuna, so to speak, for Donald Trump when it comes to these peace deals is of course Russia, Ukraine. That's the one that he campaigned on, time and time again, day in, day out on the campaign trail. I think that Donald Trump is probably getting a little frustrated with that situation. But yeah, all around the world, we've seen diplomacy in action right now. And look, the fact that Iran has one final opportunity to actually come to the negotiating table, again, they're probably not going to be able to salvage much. Their nuclear ambitions are totally donezo. It seems like if they come to the negotiating table, whatever deal might come is probably not going to result in the Ayatollah remaining in power. But if he wants to live out his remaining years in exile somewhere there, he has one final chance to do so there. So look, the irony, again, is that people say that Donald Trump has no foreign policy theory, no doctrine. He's a warmonger there. He's a Manchurian candidate for Vladimir Putin. He's a fascist, a Nazi. Rita, they have thrown literally everything and anything at this man. But he achieves peace. He achieves peace. He achieves stability there. And as we say here in the United States, just let the man cook. Because by letting him cook and letting his brain just kind of do what it does there and just call the shots like he sees there, the world ends up being a safer, more secure, and more stable place, as we've seen yet again with this fantastic and spectacular operation inside the Islamic Republic of Iran.